I must ask you, since I raised the subject of your affiliation at Chelsea, and it's in the book, did you really have it built into your contract at the Mousetrap that you couldn't go on stage until you'd seen Chelsea play in the afternoon?
I did. On the matinees in those days, I'm talking about 50 odd years ago, were in mid-afternoon, which was midweek, on a Wednesday, and a Saturday afternoon. And in those days, football started at 2:30 in the afternoon, and the matinee started. It was at 5 and 8. And because I wasn't in the play for the first about 9 or 10 minutes, I could actually arrive at the theatre when the play had started and then go on.
Of course, they wouldn't have big crowds at the bridge in those days, eh?
I beg your pardon?
There'd be no big crowds at Stamford Bridge in those days.
Andy!
How did the idea for the book come about?
Go on, Duchess.
Dick had been asked many times over by some quite heavyweight publishers to do an autobiography. And over the years he'd kept all his cuttings and his reviews and diaries. But in effect, for some reason, he never really wanted to do an autobiography. And about 3.5 years ago, a very eminent publisher phoned him and said, "Well, what about it, Dick?" And he said to Sheila, I don't want to do this. She said, "Well, why don't you try writing a book with Di?" And that's how it came about.
Yeah.
The book, I think, starts quite properly with, in career terms, your shining moment at the Oscars for Gandhi.
Before the Oscars, the big event is the Directors Guild Award, the American Directors Guild, which is those who win it very often follow with the Oscars. And there was a showing of the film, and we've seen it run with an American audience. Then we have another running of a little piece of work called E.T. And Di and I went to see it, I can't even remember where, Manhattan I think it was. And we came, I won't use the language that we use, but we came out of the running of E.T. and said, well, well done that, because there's no chance of us beating E.T. E.T. was quite superb. You remember it, I'm sure. It was a magnificent movie. And I said several times, quite apart from when we left the cinema, that I genuinely believe that E.T. should have won the Oscar as against Gandhi.
No, but it just occurred to me as you were talking, and you may not know this, another one of your discoveries has been named Entertainer of the Year for 2008 by Entertainment Weekly, which is, as you know, a huge American magazine, which was Robert Downey Jr.
Oh, I'm so pleased.
Who you found in Chaplin, and has happily come back to himself.
How wonderful, I didn't know that. Di wrote the original script of Gandhi, and Albert Chaplin, and we had an extraordinary incident where I was in my agent's in Los Angeles, and this mad character came in with a black boot polished hair all sticking up like this, and said, "I am the one actor, Mr. Attenborough, to play Charlie Chaplin. One day you'll come back to me. Goodbye, I'm very glad to have met you." And we went to him, of course, and he was utterly brilliant.
And eventually we went to Hollywood, somewhat in desperation, and we tested, I think it was 4 young up-and-coming American actors who would be acceptable to the people putting up the money. And sort of as an afterthought, we said, oh, well, you know, that boy we met, we better give him a chance, let him come in. And he was the last one to test. He came in looking like Chaplin. He researched old photographs. He'd had his hair waved like Chaplin wore his when he was a young man. He had an impeccable English accent. His lines came across wonderfully. And we said, thank you all very much. And he said, I wonder if you'd just let me go on a bit longer. I've got a little bit of comedy business to show you. And he brought a stepladder with him. Yeah. And he did this routine where he came in with a step ladder as the tramp tried to put it up, got caught up in it, got his hand caught, his head caught, went up the steps, it collapsed, and he finished on this amazing platform where he landed like a cat completely on his feet. And we just knew, just from that 2-3 minute routine, the whole crew knew that this boy had to play Charlie Chaplin.
Well, the chap was asking if there would be a fourth Jurassic Park film.
Well, I would love it to be. I'd like the money. Stephen was over 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I remember the very first time I met him. I thought this great film director and so on, and that he was coming to London and wanted to meet me, and he took me to breakfast at the Dorchester, and I remember he came in for breakfast with one of those baseball caps on, which isn't really the way you go into the Dorchester, but he was Steven Spielberg, and we sat down and he talked to me about Jurassic Park. And he said, I want you to read it, he said, I want you to read the script, please. And he said, I do assure you, I can't go on with the movie until I've cast John Hammond. The picture hangs on him in credibility, and I wondered whether you would be prepared to read the screenplay. And I said, Mr. Spielberg, if you asked me, I'd read the telephone directory and still say yes. He's the most delightful. Anyway, the answer to your question is that he talked to me about Jurassic Park 4. There have been 3, and he's now got a new script, and so that if it goes well and the pyrotechnical stuff works out, he's going to do the 4th next year, and I shall be able to pay my gas bill again.
The journey to Gandhi began with Oh, What a Lovely War, which was your directing debut. And I gather that when John Mills, who was your good and close friend, offered you the job of directing Oh, What a Lovely War, it wasn't an offer couched in the most complimentary of terms, was it?
No, it wasn't. I came home one evening, and there was a script left at the house, and Johnny and Mary lived a short distance away up the hill in Richmond, and just a note from Johnny saying, Dick, have a look at this and give me a ring. Well, I was a pushover, because I'd seen Oh, What a Lovely War maybe 3 or 4 times in the theatre. And I read it that night, and I rang him in the morning and said, oh, Johnny, I think you've done the most fantastic job with then Dayton in transferring this essentially theatrical piece of reportage and recalling of this period into a movie. I've never directed a movie, Johnny. I mean, you must be out of your mind. I can't do this. It's impossible. Why have you arrived at this ridiculous idea? And Johnny said, well, my love, we had a big debate, and we decided we had 2 choices. Either we could persuade somebody who knew absolutely bugger all about it, but who might have some new ideas and so on, or we would go with the very practiced and revered directors of musicals and so on. And Len and I decided unanimously to offer it to somebody who knew bugger all about it.